What is going on, Owl Nation? Kickoff between FAU and USF. And today we have a very special guest, a USF super fan, joining today's show. Randy, how's it going today?
Oh, it's good, man. Just having a good quiet night so far.
Yeah, we are as well here, but we expect it to get a lot more busy this weekend with a whole slate of college football games and the game at Raymond James with FAU and USF. So, Randy, I want to ask you this because, FAU, they're new to the American Conference. They recently joined the American Conference from the Conference USA, and you guys have been in the American for a while. So how do you view FAU? Do you view them as a rival like a lot of USF fans do, but a lot of them don't think this is a rivalry? Or do you view them as just another school who's kind of a lesser school with their athletic programs?
So I think it's a tough question. It's a good question, but as you know, rivals usually take time, right? You can't just be a rival because you've played a couple games. Like the reason we hated UCF so much is because we went back and we've been playing them, until they left for the Big 12. We had played them for several decades. So there was a lot of bad blood. We beat them pretty bad in the 2000s, and then they came back and, handed us in the 2000 teens. So, that's how rivalries are born. I mean, we're only a couple games into this. The first game, you guys played us in 23. We were horrible. We had no depth on either side of the ball. New coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and a really bad culture left over from two bad coaches back to back. So unfortunately, you guys handed us a pretty good butt whooping the first time. Last year, we finally had some decent guys on our ones. We still didn't have depth on the second level, but it wasn't even close. Now we're finally spending the money that we need to, but this is the most talented USF team we've had in a decade. I said that before the season. I predicted the Boise win. I predicted the Florida win. I actually predicted us to lose to Miami, if you're asking me. I've been correct on everything else. I study a lot of the game films on both. I think what your head coach is doing, I think he's the right guy. But again, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it year one or year two with him? Year one?
Year one.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of ups and downs. And, I would really, you can't really judge a coach until starting getting into year three. Let's be honest. So, he's got to really recruit whatever. I will tell you that just to give you in comparison, South Florida's recruiting budget, not NIL, their recruiting budget alone is top 20 in the country. They're almost at $2 million a year just on recruiting. So they're all in it, South Florida and NIL. Our athletic budget's over $100 million operating. It's going to be even higher here when the USF Foundation gives an update here coming up. Our assistant pool is tops in G5, where our assistant pool is between 5 and 6 million just for assistants. Golish is decently paid, but he's going to get a heck of an extension, I would assume, with an increase this fall. However, realistically, if a big power 2 job comes in, I could see him leaving. So that's kind of up in the air. But South Florida is much better. We're as good. This is, like I said, this is as good as we've been in 10 years on the 2 deep on both sides of the ball. We're not fully there yet as far as if we want to compete with the top 10 teams, but we can compete with anybody that's ranked between 10 and 25.
Yeah, you kind of answered 2 of the questions I had. I was going to ask you about how do you feel about USF being in that top 20? And then obviously with all those new job openings that we saw with Penn State and Virginia Tech, how USF would respond to that with Alex Golick, especially seeing Kurt Signetti over at Indiana getting that big extension. But I'll ask you about your quarterback. From FAU's perspective, how will stopping Byron Brown be the key? Obviously, such a dynamic player, and he's done some great things. So what do you think, honestly, is the key to kind of managing his play style?
Well, here's the thing. You got to keep him. He does really good throwing real, short, in routes. His area where he can get in trouble is those mid-range throws, the 8 to 12 to 15-yard passes, right? Your linebackers have to stay down and disciplined. And if they do that and you can keep Brown in the pocket, not necessarily, you don't want him to scramble because it's 6'3.5" and 232 pounds. Like once he gets going, good luck. But if they can keep him in the pocket and force him to make those mid-range throws, That's where he's shown that he can be a little susceptible. And we don't really know as far as USF fans, we're not sure why. Like sometimes he looks really great throwing those. Other times he looks horrible. And I don't know if it's decision making. I don't know if it's because we do have a lot of freshman receivers. So are they running the wrong routes? Are they not getting off the blocks? Like, a lot of us have questions. But it is a concern that we have. But again, that's really how you beat him. You have to keep him in the pocket. If he runs on you, you're going to lose all day. And there's, he's a guy that I've always said that unfortunately, even though it's more dangerous for injuries, he's got to run first and kind of get the juices flowing for him to be able to then settle down the pocket. He's never really done well when he starts throwing first and then running second. So, and again, as you guys know, that's more dangerous as a quarterback because you can get injured a lot easier that way. So it's a double-edged sword. But he can throw the long bomb. He's been much more accurate this year, but he also did work really hard in the offseason on throwing the long bomb. So I don't expect Nimrod, our top wide receiver, I guess you could say talent-wise, maybe not so much talent, but at least he's our most consistent long-range receiver. I would expect that he'd be out this week. I don't think he's going to play. South Florida is more focused on trying to get him ready for Memphis. Whether he's ready or not, I don't know. But I would think they would sit him. We've got about 3 or 4 true freshmen and redshirt freshman wide receivers that are going to be absolute stars. And they're gonna take the place, and we should be fine there. From my understanding, everybody else is ready to go. However, I would also not be surprised if Mac Harris were to sit for this game, even though he's one of our star linebackers, because he did get a little dinged up at the UNT game. My understanding is that he can play. He'll be ready to go for this game. However, like I said, if the game gets out of hand, I could see South Florida sitting him pretty quick because you don't want to take those chances. It's really tough. Him and Schuler are the heart of our defense. I don't care what anybody says. If those guys are playing hard, it's really hard for defenses to score. One thing we do really well against passing quarterbacks is we're very good at intercepting the ball this year. So that's where it's going to be really interesting with your quarterback because he is tops in the American in all the offensive categories statistically. But, realistically, you guys really haven't played anybody, on USF's caliber. So as the old saying goes, something's got to give. I don't know what that's going to be. I think the game could be interesting early. I would think it would be more interesting if it was on the road at FAU, but I think being at home, I know the crowd's going to be really good. And, I hope South Florida comes out hard. But one thing to keep in mind, under Golish in 3 years, sometimes we've started slow in the first quarter, right? So if FAU wants to have a shot, as you guys probably know, they have to jump out early and they have to keep scoring. I mean, you're not going to stop offensively South Florida, so you guys have to win in a shootout.
Yeah, 100%. And I really like how you describe Byron Brown. If you force him to stay in the pocket, if you take and pressure him on the edge where he can't escape the pocket and he can't use his dual threat ability on the perimeter, that's how you stop him because he is a running quarterback first. He did have over 150 rushing yards last week against North Texas. He can throw the football, though interceptions have plagued him. 1,400 passing yards, but still 5 interceptions on the season. You kind of alluded to this that you expected USF to be where they are right now because you said you expect them to have the Boise win, have the Florida win, and now they're inside the top 20. So for you, is your expectation for the rest of the season solely on a playoff spot? Is that what you're expecting from this team this season, just for FAU fans to get a sense of where you guys are as a program?
Well, I think realistically, here's the thing. I'm more of the old school USF fan, so there are things that I look at a little differently. I want a conference championship really bad. I mean, I know a lot of people are talking about college football playoff, but the reality is we've never won a conference championship, so we got to take baby steps first, right? Like we got to get there. If we can't look at the rest of our schedule. We've got you guys this weekend, then we're on the road against Memphis. We have Rice, we have UTSA, we have Navy. The reality is if South Florida can't win the rest of their schedule, being completely candid with you guys, we don't deserve to be in the playoff, right? Like it's not like if you lose to Memphis or Navy, do you really deserve to be there? I don't think so. So South Florida, unfortunately, I feel has to run the table. They have to take care of business to be able to deserve that spot. But again, I'm just taking it one game at a time. And I think a lot of the older South Florida fans will tell you the same thing because, we remember a lot of the games where we played an unranked team ranked and fell apart in the game. So I want to say this team's different than years past. However, there's a part of me that is a little hesitant because I think I got some PTSD from all the heartbreaking losses.
Yeah, 100%. And, you mentioned that you have to run the table. We think that the winner of the American is automatically going to get there. And FAU right now controls their own destiny to the American Conference Championship if they win out, because they only have one American loss right now. And they have every team ahead of them besides Memphis still on their schedule. So they would have the head-to-head, as crazy as it sounds. You kind of mentioned that Chaz Nemrard, the Tennessee transfer, number one deep ball wide receiver. You don't expect him to play. You expect him to rest. But, there still are other weapons on this team. And, one of those FAU transfer tight end, Wyatt Sullivan, who we're very familiar with. But can you talk about some of the other weapons if Nemrard doesn't play that FAU should look out for? And should FAU's defense really be more focused on stopping the run outside of Byron Brown, just with the running backs? Because you do have 4 running backs who split carries and all have the same amount of carries, which is a lot of different guys to go to with 4 different running backs. And then you do have a lot of weapons in the receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing. We're really deep at running back and wide receivers. So if we take hits there, that's the one area we can do really, really well. Like I said, we have Kayvon Singleton, who, could have gone to Miami. He chose to come to Tampa. He's a star as a redshirt freshman. He's just, you can just tell he's from the Miami area. I don't know how to explain it. He's built differently. He's 6'3", he's 220. He can turn. He's got great hips. You have Chris Neptune from the East Coast of Florida. He's going to be a star. You have Kroger, who's another emerging star. A lot of these guys had Power 2 and Power 4 offers. They just chose. They were like, hey, instead of rotting on the bench for 2 years, I'm going to go to South Florida, play right away. And you can see now whether that means that in a year from now, several of them get poached for NIL. That's part of the deal, right? We're not in the Power 4 yet, so a lot of those guys are looking for an opportunity. But South Florida is doing great in recruiting. As far as running backs go, there's an old saying, if you got 4 guys, you probably don't have one. I will tell you the Alvon Isaac guy is electric. I think he should be our starter. However, he's a redshirt freshman, right? So unfortunately, coaches tend to play their more senior guys like a Norton, like a Sam Franklin, those guys. But our 2 stars are Chase Garnett and Alvin Isaac, but one's a true freshman out of Texas. The Garnett kid's going to be a star. He just needs to understand the game better, get in the weight room. And then Alvin Isaac, he was one of those kids, he could have gone to Florida, but he would have had to sit for 2 years before he would have played. At South Florida, he started playing last year. So he's really talented. I think he's going to be a star. I feel like he should be our starter. However, I'm sure the coaches like to reward some of the seniors and juniors a little bit more playing time. But as far as injuries go, we're very fortunate in the wide receiver and the running back room to just plug and chug guys. But again, I keep saying it. Our offense goes as Brown goes. If you stuff Brown, you stop him from throwing, you stop him from running, which are very hard to do. But if you do it, we're one-dimensional offensively. So pretty much our whole season, revolves around him offensively. But you see when he's good, he's good. When he's bad, he's bad. The one thing that I am worried about going to this game, it's happened the last couple of games, and it's got to get cleaned up, is in the North Texas game, for instance, we had I believe 2 fumbles and an interception. The interception Brown threw, that was completely on him. He got a little greedy, threw off his back foot, and was a little delayed with the timing. It is what it is. UNT made a great player. The other 2 fumbles were super weird. One, Brown just dropped the ball after he got hit, but you could see he just dropped it. And then the running back just dropped the ball. No one was near him. So we've really got to clean those up, because we can't have 2-3 turnovers in the first quarter and put, FAU in the red zone twice. It's tough to dig out of those holes. And we did it against Charlotte too. We had some really boneheaded fumbles. Prior to that, we hadn't fumbled at all. So I don't know if it's just a focus thing. I don't know. I'm hoping they can clean it up. I know the coaches are working on it. But like in the UNT game, if we don't fumble those 2 balls, we win 80, I think, to 14, I think, with the numbers. So like I said, a lot of South Florida's issues are self-inflicted. But remember, in Golish's reign the last 3 years, we tend to start kind of slow in the first quarter, and then we get going by the second and third. I will say something about Brown. He is phenomenal in the 2-minute offense. So if you look at all our games this year, in the 2-minute offense, I want to say he's almost, I think he's 100% putting points on the board. And in crucial moments, big moments, he's delivered. So I know he worked really hard in the spring and the summer on that. And I've heard all year that he's phenomenal in the 2-minute drills. So if it says a situation comes up Saturday night and South Florida's got the ball and it's either the first half 2-minute drill or whatever, the odds are very good that Brown's going to be able to put points on the board if it's in the 2-minute offense.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this offense and obviously Byron Brown, some of the depth that they have there. That USF defense also been pretty great. Obviously, that second half against North Texas, a lot of turnovers created. Jalen Schuler, obviously a great player, makes a lot of great tackles, 54, which is fifth in the conference. Can you tell me about Jarvis Lee, though, the cornerback? 2 interceptions on the year. What makes him so special? And maybe some other standouts on defense.
So, our secondary coach was the former secondary coach for the Chicago Bears before he got here last year. He's made a huge difference in our secondary, making sure they play, press man coverage and assignment football. So a lot of the interceptions you're seeing just happen because the guys are playing the right schemes and the right assignments. So they're right where they need to be, and they're letting, by playing assignment football, they're letting the ball come to them. Again, a lot of these guys just have a good knock for the ball. South Florida's been not just great at recruiting and player, figuring out who fits their schemes, but they've been really, really good at player development. And you're seeing that. A lot of these guys, like I said, they could have gone elsewhere, but they were raw. So they came to South Florida. They've let themselves be developed. They've bought into a culture. Again, you got to give credit. If you look at these interceptions, a lot of times because the defensive line or our linebackers are putting pressure on the quarterback to force him into a situation where they have to throw the ball. Like, if I know a guy's coming from my blind side and he's got to throw it up because he's going to get destroyed, it's a whole lot easier to go get that interception than it is if he has, 5-6 seconds to scan the field and make a good throw on the front of his foot. So a lot of the credit actually just goes to the front seven, and that's where our back guys are able to, make some plays, is because our guys up front, our biggest issue last year, if you followed us, was that, especially on the lines, especially on the defensive line. Offensively, our first line guys are good. Second, we didn't have depth on the offensive line. So the moment a guy went down, we couldn't pass block, we couldn't run block, we had trouble. On the defensive side of the ball, we were horrible. I think we had 1 or 2 guys that could play. One guy ended up transferring because he got a big NIL bag to LSU to be their defensive tackle this year. So we thought going into the season that sucked. Obviously, that's a huge loss, but they hit the portal really hard, and one of those guys, Muirfield, who came from you guys, I believe was your team defensive captain. Tough loss on that, but he's been tremendous up front for us. But we have all our other guys on the line are from either SEC schools or I think one guy transferred. 2 tackles came from Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. They're so those guys are pretty good. And then our other defensive ends had power 2 offers. So we're loaded on the 2 deep on the defensive side. And then we've got a couple seniors like Muirfield that came over that can play and just really good motors. So that's been the biggest difference between last year and this year, is that our defensive line has been able to stay home, get some pressure on the quarterbacks, but they don't miss assignments. And we are very good at stopping the run, especially against very good offensive lines and stopping very talented running backs. We did it against Florida, who I thought is, and I still think is, the best running back in the SEC. Florida's offensive line was top 10 in the country. They still are. And we were able to penetrate and stop him 3 quarters, second, third, and fourth. And then against Miami, their quarterback had all day to throw, which rightfully so. Miami's offensive line is great, but they had trouble running on us, and they had 2 really good backs, and they couldn't run on us. So they had to beat us through the air, and they blew us out that way, and it is what it is. But we've been very good at stopping the runs. So your quarterback on Saturday night, he's going to have to throw a lot. If you're not going to be able to run much on us. The other thing that you're going to have to follow along too is, once you get through the first 15, 20 scripted plays in the second quarter and late, our defense usually starts to take over physically. So your quarterback's got to be able to stay in the pocket, and he's going to get hit. I mean, he's just got to be able to, respond well to getting physically hit. He's going to be bruised after the game. It is what it is. That's how our guys play. They're very physical. They like to hit violent. And they talk about in practice, they want to see violence out there. Like, that's just a coach's mentality. Our defensive line coach is Kevin Patrick, who used to be yours under Lane Kiffin. He was phenomenal for you guys. And he was with Jim Levitt back in the 2000s and Coach Selvey and Pierre Paul and all those guys. And he's made a tremendous impact on our defensive line, and you can see it. So at the end of the day, that the players have taken on the coach's mentality on the defensive side of the ball, and they play violent, and they try to hurt you. It's preached upon. It's a mentality. It's a culture. So it's going to be really interesting to see, how your quarterback responds under pressure, because he's going to feel it, and that's where you're really going to find out a lot about him. Is can he take those hits? Hopefully, your offensive line can give him some time. But I've looked at the game film for both teams. If South Florida takes care of the football, this game's a blowout.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned the D line is the position group that has improved the most for you guys from last year to this year. FAU is very similar to that. Our defensive line is the position group that has improved so much.
Yeah.
We're probably have one of the best D lines in all of the American Conference. CJ Doggett had 3 sacks last week. Najon Barber's probably going to win Defensive Freshman of the Year in the conference. The D line is so deep. Bryce Langston, Najon Barber, Deshaun Batiste, Wilkie Denaud. I mean, there's so many guys who can get after Byron Brown, just like your D line with a bunch of SEC transfers. So, how would you say this USF offensive line is going to go up against this very strong defensive line for FAU? And I saw that they ranked 4th according to PFF overall in the conference, USF's offensive line. So how do you think that matchup's going to be? And you kind of talked about it, in the trenches, USF was able to not get beat that much by Florida, clearly. And those are a bunch of SEC NFL guys who are going to be playing on Sundays. So do you think FAU is going to have a lot of trouble in the trenches, especially getting after Byron Brown?
I think it depends. Offensively, our offensive line is very deep. It's very talented, and when they come to play, they've been very, very good. I know, like when they talk about the American stuff, a lot of those numbers are skewed because it's based on the whole season. So they look at it, and it's really tough to tell. Like I said, Miami was the best team, and I've said it all along. I thought, from what I've seen so far through 6-7 weeks of the season, Miami is the best team in the country. But with that said, their defensive line at Miami was nasty. Florida had a top 10 defensive line as well, but South Florida's offensive line stayed pretty good with that. It really just depends. Like I said, if you looked at the North Texas game, from the end of the second quarter through the fourth quarter, South Florida's offensive line was outstanding, right? But in the first quarter, UNT got a little pressure on South Florida, and I don't know, was it a scheme thing? Was it a play call thing? Like I said, and UNT was playing with a lot of adrenaline in the first quarter and a half. I mean, that's the advantage of being home field when you've got a sellout crowd and the biggest game in school history. Your guys, the adrenaline can last at least the first half. So once the adrenaline wore off, the talent level discrepancy took over, and it was a race to the end, the rest of the game. So like I said, you made a comment about your D line. Look, you got a lot of Florida kids, right? And I've always said I'd rather have a high 3-star kid playing from Florida on my team than a high 4-star from Pennsylvania or New Jersey or Connecticut, because those kids, once you develop them, they're always better than the rest of the country. The talent in Florida and the Southeast is so much different than the rest of the country. And so, like I said, if FAU is recruiting a bunch of 3-stars for the coach, but they can develop them, you guys can be pretty good in a couple of years. I just think that being year one, I've watched a lot of these rebuilds. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have, like, you're in a situation where you're on a winning streak. You guys look great. And then you'll go and play a team that, the lights are a little too bright. Like we were there 3 years ago. Our coach would say that, unfortunately, we went on the road on a Friday night and got blown out by UTSA when we thought maybe we'd have a chance, and the lights were just too bright. Like, you have to grow as a team, and you have to go through those. And, first you lose big, then you lose close, then you win close, and then you win big. And we're kind of in the between right now where we're winning close and we're also winning big. So we're right there. But, winning big usually happens in year 4. It will be interesting to see, though, if we get year 4 with Golis, just because he's having a great year, and rightfully so. And he's going to be a hot commodity at the end of the year. And I know South Florida can pay him pretty well. They can pay him Power 4 money, but they can't pay him Power 2 money yet because you need a TV deal for that. So as you saw, the Indiana coach, he got 11.3 or 11.4 million. When you're getting 80 to 100 million dollars a year in TV money, it's a little bit easier to pay your coach that kind of money. So it'll be real interesting to see if we make it to year 4 with Golish. I'd love to, but I'm also realistic. But as I always say, if they leave early, it means that they left your program in really a good spot. So you can't really complain. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys have some talent. Your quarterback's having a great year. And, obviously you've got a really good offensive play caller coach from, as he has an offensive background. And you can see where he's going to take the program. He just might need a couple more years to get there. Because like I said, it's tough to do it in year 1. But I think the game will be really interesting. Like I said, I'm not going to go out and say it's a blowout or anything like that. I will say, like I said, South Florida has to take care of the football. If we don't take care of the football, you guys are going to hang around. So that's what, if I'm an FAU fan, that's what I'm looking for early. Is this, does South Florida protect the football, or do they start fumbling it? Does Brown throw an early interception? Because the longer that FAU can hang around, obviously with South Florida being ranked, and now all the pressure's on them in this game. So we don't want to go into the second half with you guys close, because then, maybe we tighten up. I don't know. But that's what teams tend to do. And hopefully South Florida takes care of business, but I'm also realistic. These are the games that scare me the most because everybody's expecting you to win big. You've got a good ranking. You look good. You're just coming off a big win. And you got Memphis next week. So that's the other concern I don't want them to overlook. So like I said, as an older USF fan, I'm concerned about a lot of the little things. I take my green and gold glasses off, and realistically, this could be a trap game for South Florida. So I'm hoping they take care of business and it doesn't end up being that way.
Yeah, 100%. And, that makes a lot of sense. If you guys do protect the football, you are more talented. So most likely you are going to win. But you mentioned Caden Belkamp. He's a very talented quarterback for FAU. He does have 9 interceptions this season, but he only has 1 American Conference interception. So he has improved every single week. If FAU, and you said if they want to win, they have to aerate it out. They have to go through the passing game. If he's able to hit his guys and get open receivers, I think that FAU could definitely hang around, especially if we can cause some turnovers. I was watching some film from you guys, and I saw there was a fake punt in week 1 against Boise State. And then there was a trick special teams play against UF. And then I think maybe one more or something later. Can we expect, another fake punt or something crazy on special teams? And your kicker, he is NFL talent. He can kick 50 plus. How would you overall evaluate the special teams for USF? And do you think that we could see a trick play in there?
Yes, I look. I mean, Golish he's got a bag full of tricks. It's not just 2 or 3. Apparently, I've heard he's got a half a dozen or more. And at the end of fall camp, they actually run through all the players that have, any of them that played quarterback in high school, whatever. There's a lot of kids, so they give them the opportunities to try a whole bunch of different stuff, and then they go through an actual competition, and then from there they select a handful of guys to use later in the season. The guy that threw the fake punt is going to be our star quarterback after Brown leaves. Lockett, I think. Hewlin Lockett. He's actually from the St. Augustine area. He had big time offers. Chose to go to South Florida. He needs to sit a year and develop and whatever. But you could see it. He's going to have a great arm. He's accurate. He's a big kid. He's like 6'4", 6'5", something like that. So he will be the heir apparent when Brown leaves. And everything I've heard is he's going to be a star. But he was our fake punt guy. Caught Boise napping. The Florida one. Like I said, Golish is not afraid to draw it up, and his offensive play calling has gotten better and better as he's gotten more comfortable with his talent around him. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they do that, but a lot of times, like I said, he has the, hey, when you're up, step on your opponent's throat mentality. Like, he's not going to let up the gas. It doesn't matter if they're up by 20. He's still going to keep pouring on the score because he's terrified of a team coming back, like whether you call it, paranoia or whatever. So that's the thing. It's gonna have to be a scoring match. Regarding your quarterback, yes, I know he's throwing some interceptions, but the reality is that's your offense, right? So you guys are aggressive, right? And when you're aggressive, sometimes you're gonna throw a pick. And the one thing that I'm curious to watch is, picks are going to be thrown, but how does he respond after he throws a pick? Does he put his head down? Does he run to the side? Or does he run to the side, take blame for it and say, hey, guys, that's on me. Let's go, let's go, let's go. That's one thing that makes Brown really good is even when he throws a pick, he's smiling on the sidelines. He's telling the coaches, like, hey, no worries. Give me the ball back. Let's go. Like, it's just a maturity. And I'm really curious to see how your quarterback handles when he does throw a couple interceptions, because he's probably going to. But it's not whether he throws the interceptions, is how does he respond to those interceptions, because that'll decide whether it keeps him in the game. And again, if you're an FAU fan, you have to realize, like, your offense is aggressive. So guess what? You're going to throw some interceptions. You're going to take some chances, like, because you're playing to win. You're not playing to lose. That's one thing about your offensive coordinator. He's an aggressive coordinator. And especially in year one, your quarterback's going to make mistakes, but that's okay. Like, that's how you learn, and I'd much rather my team lose because they're trying and they're aggressive than if they're playing conservative. And then, it's easier for a fan to get into it if your team's playing to win. And especially on the road, you play to win. At home, you play for the tie, right? Because you got the home crowd. So you're going to have to be super aggressive, knowing that you're going to throw some picks, and that's okay because you're trying to go there to win. You're not trying to go to tie, and you're not trying to go home with an L. So, FAU has to go in knowing that they're going to have a couple turnovers, but how do they weather that storm, and how do they respond? And again, that's really tough to do in year one. And what year is your quarterback? I don't have it in front of me.
He's year one at FAU. Year two.
So he's a freshman. Is he redshirt freshman or freshman?
He's a redshirt junior.
Okay, a redshirt junior. So again, it's year one, right? I think this time next year he'll probably be a completely different player in a good way, because it takes about 18 months to learn an offense. Everything I've ever seen, but so it's going to be a really interesting game. But like I said, I don't think if you're an FAU fan, you should get down if he throws a pick or two. Just watch his demeanor, watch his body language on the sidelines, and as long as he doesn't look dejected and he looks kind of upbeat, like, hey, let's go, it's big, no big deal, that's a good sign. So I think that's what you're more watching for. Again, Brown may throw a pick or two, so they usually tend to even out. I've always noticed that turnovers, if you watch all the games, sometimes or a play, like you'll get a bad play maybe in the quarter one, but then in quarter two, you'll get a play your way that you go, hey, you know what, maybe that wasn't a penalty. So everything tends to even itself out over the game, so I think if you're an FAU fan, I think you just, remember that and go, hey, maybe we threw a pick this time, but Brown might throw a pick in the third quarter when it's close. I don't know. But they tend to work themselves out.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And Caden Velkamp, he's not having to learn a completely new system because Zach Kittley was the offensive coordinator and recruited him at Western Kentucky. And he was the Conference USA Player of the Year at Western Kentucky. He is, one of the best quarterbacks in all of the American Conference talent-wise. And he showed it throughout the last 2 years. So second year as a starter, first year as a starter here at FAU. Hopefully, he'll be able to develop under Kittley. And, it is still a new playbook that he has to learn. But Kittley did recruit him over at Western Kentucky. I wanted to ask you two quick rapid-fire questions here.
Yeah.
So, first one is FAU to USF geography-wise, it's not that far away. And me, obviously, I want to go to the game. I'm not of age to drive. I'm trying to convince my parents to go. But, it's 4 hours away. And a lot of FAU fans are thinking of making the trip up there and possibly can make it up there. And if you're watching this, you're in the Boca area, obviously you want your stadium to be packed out in USF, but how would you just describe the stadium? Because it isn't a college football stadium. It's an NFL stadium. It's off campus. Is it worth for FAU fans to drive the 4 hours? Because it is a top 20 matchup. So a lot of people are thinking about it.
Well, I think it depends on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. Right. So when it comes to tailgating, unfortunately, because it's an NFL stadium, it only opens up 4 hours before the game. So if the game's at, I think, 7:30, you can't even start tailgating till 3:30. So the question is, you go over there, what are you going to do? Right. So if you want to go see downtown Tampa, you want to go to Grand Central, you want to go to Hyde Park, you want to see some of the eatery places, and you want to experience Tampa, Busch Gardens right there, a lot to do. But don't get it twisted. You only got 4 hours to tailgate, and if the game is a blowout, which I believe it will be, again, that's just my opinion. Now you're looking at a 4 hour drive plus back home, unless you get a hotel room. So, it's really tough. I mean, look, there's nothing special about Raymond James. South Florida fans might scream at me. But I'm a big proponent of on-campus stadiums, and I know obviously you guys have one. I think it just the culture, the environment is just way different. Now I was at the South Florida games, years ago when we played West Virginia, and all those Big East games. I was at every one. It was electric. However, it's been a long time since that, and like I said, I expect a really good crowd. But it's still an NFL stadium. It's got red pewter all over the seats. Got a pirate ship in the back. It's just a weird feel. It's never felt like home to me as an alumni or a fan or a student. So a lot of us are looking forward to the on-campus stadium because that'll be sold out every game. And the way they're doing it is phenomenal. So again, it's not one of those like a must-see stadium, if that makes sense. If that's what you're really asking, like it's not something that you're gonna anything special that you'll miss by not going to the game. You might enjoy just being in your AC and watching on your 65-inch TV with your food and your pizza. And if the team loses, you can flip the channel and whatever. But it's not one of those college game atmospheres that I would say is a must-see. In 2 years when we open our on-campus stadium, I would absolutely say that you would want to go to that. But somebody that's been to pretty much every Power 4 school as far as for an experience for home games over the years, it's just average. It just doesn't have a on-campus feel. And to me, when you don't have that, it's really hard to get into the game, especially beforehand. As far as fans, the USF fans are great. As long as you're respectful and courteous, they've been wonderful for visitors. So there is really good hospitality there. But again, it's not something that I would sit there and go, you have to go to. You're not going to miss out if you don't make the game as far as the experience goes.
Yeah, 100%. And, that makes sense. But on-campus stadium, you guys should be looking forward to it. Looks like it's going to be fully done in 2028. Last one for me, rapid fire here. You mentioned earlier you have a little PTSD and you're a little bit hesitant of saying that this team can make the college football playoff. What's your biggest concern and what makes you so hesitant about this team this year? And, to follow up on that, what can FAU do to maybe, win this game to pull off the upset? What is that concern? How can FAU utilize that and take advantage of that?
All right. So let me address the second one first. Defensively, our defense is very good. It'll keep us in the game. But the key to the whole thing is Brown. If you stop him, you keep him in the pocket, and you force him to throw. If he can't get moving with his legs, again, he's the key to the whole offense. You stop Brown, it's very hard for our offense to score. Everything runs through him, whether it's the trick plays, whether it's handoffs to the running back, whether it's the running with him, whether it's the passing, everything goes through Brown. So he has to be the focal point. If you do a really good job containing him, keeping him in the pocket, not allowing him to run, and then forcing him to make a lot of those mid-range throws, if you cover well downfield with your safeties and keep them from, throwing the bomb, or you guys play good assignment football up front and stop our guys in the flats with the short passes, and you force them to do those medium range throws. Again, as I said earlier, that's where he's going to make. He's been prone to make mistakes, and that's going to give you your best shot to stay in the game. To answer your first question, the reality is we've never done it. Like I said, we've never won a conference championship. And the closest we came to anything was 2007. And we were 7-0, 6. I think we were 7-0 going on the road to play Rutgers. And, we, like a lot of people, we thought we would just continue to win. And long story short, we got screwed on a couple bad calls in the third quarter after the replay. And we fell apart. And then we lost 3 in a row. And we never really recovered the rest of the year. And then, it took us years to get back. And so we've never done it. So obviously I'm going to be skeptical. It's like the old saying is, show me, what have you done for me lately? Like, what has just South Florida ever done? They've never won a conference championship. So until they do, I have every right to question it and be skeptical. Number 2 is we still have 2 really hard games left on the road against Memphis and on the road against Navy. Navy's probably going to be undefeated. If you look at their record, when we play them, they may be 9-0. Or 8-0 or whatever it is. I have to look. That game in Annapolis is tough. It's at noon. And, South Florida historically has sometimes had trouble getting up for the noon games. The Memphis game's at noon, right? On the road. I think I feel more comfortable about the Memphis game because of the fact that Memphis is ranked. So I know our guys will be focused and jacked up for that game. And all year, whenever we've been focused, we've done very well. The Navy game, I'm hoping that they are undefeated when we go to play them because I feel like if they have a loss or two, that'll put us more in what I would call upset alert. But I think if Navy's undefeated, we'll be more focused and serious on them. So a lot of it still has to play out yet. But I think for South Florida to run the table, Memphis has to win this weekend against UAB and be undefeated when we face them because I think we'll play well. And then I think Navy has to stay undefeated for us to get to them, or I'm worried that we could, maybe take them for granted when we go up there. Now, if you look at Navy, yes, they're undefeated, but they barely won all their games and they haven't played anybody. So it's really hard. It's like UNT, they were 5-0, but they hadn't played anybody. So, you can't just look at records. And when I look at Navy, I would tell you that we should win all the rest of our games. Memphis is the only one I'm not sure on because I haven't watched a whole lot of game film on them. So I don't want to make an assumption yet. But they're well coached. They do have NIL money. So obviously they got players. And again, they've been, the top of the league the last 10 years. So, that's where we're trying to go. So, and we got to stay healthy. You guys know that as well as everybody. If you can be all good as you want, but if you lose a couple of key players, go down with some injuries, your season can go in the toilet. So you got to have some luck too. So again, we'll see how it all transpires. I would think out of all the teams I've seen this year, in the American, South Florida on both sides of the ball is most talented. We have the biggest NIL. We've done everything right as far as giving into the program and putting everything forward. But you and I both know that doesn't always mean a victory. So, because it's college kids, 18 to 22, it doesn't matter how much you're paying them. That they still got to show up, and mentally they're all over the place sometimes. So you don't know what you're getting. So, like I said, I think this game will be fun this weekend. Obviously, a lot of the kids on both sides of the ball have played each other in high school, so there is that, right? Like you were talking earlier, like when we talk about rivalries, maybe not for the fans yet, but the players, a lot of times they've played each other in high school for 4 years. They already hate each other. You know what I mean? They know everything about each other. They know about their families and their friends, and there's a lot on the line there. So I think for the players, there might be some good rivalry going on, but I think the game will be fun. You obviously know both teams can score, so it's not going to be a boring game. It's just really going to come down to who protects the football and whose defense plays better. I mean, that's really it. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, you mentioned Navy and Memphis, obviously two teams that run the ball. Navy plays Notre Dame before you guys take them on in Annapolis, so that'll be a tough game on the road for them. And me and JJ have both seen Memphis, a very run-heavy team, and obviously Navy, also a little bit of a run-heavy team. I think we're getting ready to wrap this up here. So can I get your final score prediction? Obviously, the spread right now sitting at 21.5 with USF as a favorite. Do you think that's a fair spread? And
I do.
What's your prediction?
I do think it's a fair spread. I actually wouldn't be surprised if it's more. Just because, like I said, you guys are in year one, we're in year three. Your frontline guys can play, but you don't have the depth that we have yet. So I could see South Florida winning, 49-14, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know if they get to 50 for 4 straight games. But the other part I'll say, too, is you mentioned on Navy and Memphis, run heavy. South Florida does very well against stopping the run. Where we've had problems, right, is a really accurate throwing quarterback. So that's why this FAU game is interesting, because your quarterback can throw. So when we face teams that could actually throw and connect to the receivers, the other team scored a little bit, and we were okay. So we'll see how it goes. But like I said, I think it'll be a fun game. And like I said, the first quarter I would expect to be close because, like I said, the first 15, 20 plays are usually scripted. So there's not much thinking. I expect your quarterback to come out slinging it, and and you guys can see what happens. But again, I think being at homecoming for South Florida, I think they'll turn it on in the third quarter.
Yeah, 100%. And Blake and I will give our quick score predictions. Blake, we'll start with you real quick. What's your prediction?
Yeah, I did predict before the year USF was going to win this game, and just from what I've seen from them, it's going to be very tough for FAU to keep it up. I think they might have a chance of covering the spread, though. I think a 20-point win for USF could possibly be in the cards. So I'll go USF wins 42-21, maybe just on the line a little. Better's nightmare there, a 1 point away from covering.
Yeah, 100%. First off, before I give mine, Randy, you did an excellent job breaking it down. Thank you so much. Excellent breakdown. And the way I look at it, viewers watching this show learned about USF because of you. So thank you so much for that. The homer in me wants to take the Owls here. It is our biggest game of the year. And, I've been talking on social media saying that FAU could pull off the upset, especially with a few injuries that you guys have. But the reporter side of me wants to pick USF here. So I am going to say USF wins 10 points. This is going to be like a 31-21 type of game.
Okay.
For all three of us going with USF again, Randy, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, so real quick, thank you for having me. I think you guys are doing a great job. I know you're younger, but don't let it stop you. Just keep going, and you'll get better each time. Like I said, I appreciate having me on. Two things to look for in the game before the game starts. Again, I don't expect Nimrod to play, so that'll obviously change things. As far as players, look to see if Mac Harris is lining up because, like I said, he did get dinged up, so I'm curious to see if they hold him out. Sam Franklin, Quintarius Norton, one of our original starter running back. I don't know if he's going to be back yet. He had a neck injury at Charlotte, so he might still be out. Again, I don't know when his return time is. Sam Franklin got dinged up with, I believe, his toe because we played on the turf against UNT. So I'm not 100% sure that he might get many reps. So those are two running backs. And then I'm trying to think. We had Muirfield. Remember, he had the issue going on with his shoulder. So I'm curious to see how he responds to that. And then there was I think Bowman, our left tackle, at one point, I can't remember. I don't know if he went out because of really bad cramping or if he tweaked something. But from my understanding, the only one that had an issue was Nimrod. However, I wouldn't be surprised if several guys are held out just for precautionary reasons, just to make sure they're ready for Memphis. So as you said, do I believe it'll be a blowout at South Florida? Absolutely. However, it could be a little bit closer than what they think in Vegas because of the fact that if South Florida sits some of their guys, especially their starters, obviously that could change the dynamics a little bit for FAU. So that's why I said it's an intriguing game. I think it'll be great for the fans, two in-state teams. And to answer the last question too, like we talked, FAU and USF are not a rival right now, right? I don't know where it'll be in the future, but the only way you can have those games, you got to have really classic games. You got to have some knockdowns. You got to have some drag out fights. Both games have been lopsided. So this will be the tiebreaker year 3. I will tell you that as far as conference realignment, South Florida is not going to be in the American much longer. I'll give you two little tidbits from my sources. There are 2 time frames. I've heard after March Madness of next year, the Monday after the week after the national championship game. It could be as soon as that Tuesday morning. I think you'll hear from the SEC first. There'll be 1, maybe 2 teams that could announce. The Big Ten will not announce any additions until they see what the SEC does. If the SEC does nothing, they will do nothing. There's talk about both leagues going to 21. You're seeing the private equity stuff. However, there's some issues with taxes because it could change the nonprofit status of the universities. And you could imagine if you have a $100 million athletic budget, now you got to pay taxes on that. You could see where all that TV revenue would go bye-bye. So the March, so April of next year, and then the late spring, early summer of 2027. Those are the 2 dates that, I've been told could very well have some movement. And the other thing that's really important for FAU is they got to keep playing well, right? Like winning solves a lot of issues. They don't know if, who's to say in 5 years, if FAU does really well, they don't position themselves for a possible, Big 12 or an ACC invite if they increase their academics or win. So it's important for you guys to win too, because, somebody's got to fill the vacuum after we leave. And you guys could run the conference every year, right? But you got to win, you got to do it on the field. So there's a lot of intriguing parts, but be very, aware. South Florida's not just playing for a conference title. They know they have this year and maybe next year to put a resume together for the Big Ten and Fox, and that's what they're shooting for. I've gone on a limb and said it multiple times. I think that's where South Florida is going to end up, and they announced by 2027 that they'll join the Big Ten by 2028. I've been ridiculed. I've been hammered for it, but I know what I know, and I've been very fortunate to know some really, really well-connected people inside the Big Ten, inside the SEC, and at ESPN and Fox. So I only can, go by what I hear. There's a lot of specifics I can't get into, but like I said, these schools are playing for a lot more than just a game. They're playing for, possible realignment. They're playing for being tops of the league if one team leaves. So there's a lot at stake outside of this game. So that's why I said it's just a lot of pressure. And I don't know if I'd want to be those kids on either side of the ball. I think it would take some of the fun of it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, 100%. UCF right next to you guys, they moved up. So why can't USF? Thank you so much, Randy.
You're welcome,
We'll
guys.
see you guys again tomorrow. This is your daily FAU podcast, FAU Night House. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and as always, go Owls.
Thanks, guys. Goodbye.